Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a fascinating mystery that's been hiding in plain sight on bookshelves all around the world. It's one of those things you might have seen 100 times, but never really thought about. Have you ever noticed this? The Jewish Bible, known as the Tanakh, and the Christian Old Testament, they have the same core books, but they end in completely different places, with totally different feelings. One ends with this amazing, hopeful command to go up and rebuild. The other, it closes with a really solemn warning. Now, this is way more than just shuffling the table of contents. It's like telling the same epic story, but giving it two different endings. And that final chapter changes everything about the story's message. So, how did this happen? Well, to figure it out, let's take a tour of two magnificent ancient libraries. Here's our map for the journey. We're going to start with this mysterious difference. Then we'll tour the Tanakh library and the Old Testament library. We'll find that exact fork in the road of history where things split, and then we'll see why this order matters so much. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with a challenge for you. Okay, first stop. Imagine we're stepping into a vast ancient library. You can almost smell the old scrolls and parchment, can't you? This is the library of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible. And what's so cool is that it isn't organized by genre like a bookstore today. Nope, it has a very specific three-part blueprint, kind of like a grand building. The Tanakh's architecture is actually right there in its name. It's an acronym, T-N-K. T for Torah, N for Nevi'im, and K for Ketuvim. This whole structure is designed to tell a story, starting with the foundation and building its way up, piece by piece. So at the very bottom you have the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. This is the absolute bedrock, the foundation of it all. Then, building on top of that, you get the Nevi'im, the prophets, who act like the walls and the structure of the house. And finally, you have the Ketuim, or the writings. This is the stuff that fills the house with soul, all the poetry, the wisdom, and the histories. And right here is where you can really see the difference in the blueprints. Take a look at the book of Daniel. In most Christian Bibles, you'll find Daniel filed under prophets. But here, in the Tanakh, it's placed in the Ketuvim, the writings, and that's a huge deal. It means it's being read as a historical story about God's actions during the exile, not just a book about future predictions. Okay, let's step out of that library and walk across the hall into a different one. The books inside are all the same, the scrolls are the same, but the arrangement is completely different. This library is organized by genre, a lot like you'd find in a bookstore today. So this structure groups books by their literary style. All the history books are together, poetry with poetry, and, this is the key, all the prophetic books are gathered together into one big section right at the very end. This one change has a massive impact. So the big question is, how did we end up with two different blueprints for the exact same collection of books? Well, the answer lies at a crucial fork in the road of history. It all came down to two different ancient versions of the scriptures that became the standard for two different communities. The Tanakh's three-part structure comes from what's called the Masoretic text. This is the authoritative, original Hebrew version which was preserved and copied with incredible care for centuries by Jewish scribes. You can think of it as the original master blueprint. Now, on the other hand, many of the early Christians spoke Greek, not Hebrew, so they mostly used a Greek translation called the Septuagint. And guess what? The Septuagint arranged the books by genre. That order became the model for the Christian Old Testament. So that was the moment. That was the fork in the road that sent these two libraries down two different paths. But you might be thinking, does this different shelving order really change anything? Oh, absolutely. Think about it. The last scene of a movie or the last chapter of a book, it leaves you with a final thought, a specific expectation. It completely changes the entire emphasis of the story you've just experienced. The Tanakh ends on this powerful note of hope. After all the exile and destruction, the very last words are a command to go back, rebuild a temple, and go home. It's a story that ends with a call to action. It says, the story continues in what you do next. Let him go up. But the Christian Old Testament, it ends with a dramatic cliffhanger. It closes with a prophet's warning and a promise of a future messenger, Elijah. This creates a narrative tension, a feeling of to be continued, that points directly to the story of the New Testament. So you see, one library ends its story with the people getting back to work, returning to their land to rebuild. The other ends on a note of anticipation, with everyone holding their breath waiting for what's next. Two blueprints, two very different narrative destinations, all determined by which book comes last. This isn't just some fascinating piece of literary history. The principle behind it, that the order of a story shapes its meaning, is a really powerful lesson for our own lives. The way we sequence events, whether in an ancient book or just in our own day, can determine the outcome.
How we arrange the steps we take can completely change how our day goes, how a project turns out, even how our relationships feel. And this brings us to this week's Midot Challenge. Midot are basically character traits or dimensions of ourselves that we can work on. And this week, we're going to focus on the trait of order.
The Hebrew word for this kind of intentional order is seder. And just like the ancient scribes understood that the seder of their scriptures shaped its final message, we can consciously choose the seder of our own actions to create more successful and peaceful endings in our own lives.
So as you go through your week, I want you to consider this. What kind of ending are you building for your day? How does the order of your daily story shape the person you are becoming? Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.